Ja, men god morgon på er allesammans. Varmt välkomna till oss på Cancerföreningen Palema idag på Världspankreascancerdagen 2024. Jag brukar säga WPCD, det är lite enklare. Jag heter Anders Albin, är kanslichef på Palema och ska vara moderator nu här på det här förmiddagspasset idag. Vi har ju nämligen 2 webbinarier idag. Ett nu på morgonen här mellan 9 och 12 och ett på eftermiddagen mellan 14 och 18. Kom ihåg också att om ni har anmält er till morgonpasset här nu så är det inte samma länk till eftermiddagen, så ni får anmäla er separat till den. Men anmälan ligger öppen på hemsidan så det går utmärkt att anmäla sig där, så får ni länken direkt. Den här sessionen på morgonen kommer faktiskt att hållas på engelska eftersom våra talare är engelsktalande, så jag hoppas att ni är okej med det och att ni hänger med på det. Vi kommer att göra som så att när vi lägger ut den här i efterhand på hemsidan så ska vi försöka texta den till svenska om det skulle vara någonting ni missade där. Som vanligt så skriver ni era frågor i chatten till höger till våra talare. Ni får skriva på svenska om ni vill, så ska vi försöka översätta. Om ni inte skriver för krångliga ord ska vi nog klara av det. Ja, och som ni ser så är jag inte ensam här idag. Jag har med mig min kollega från vår diagnosgrupp Pankreas, Christina. Hej Christina.
Hej och hej allihopa. God morgon. Ja, Christina Gerde heter jag och jag är cancerdrabbad, bukspottkörtelcancerdrabbad. Och idag såklart med i Palema och sen ett halvår tillbaka också i den arbetsgruppen som jobbar med bukspottkörtelcancer. Jag kommer också vara med här under förmiddagen och även i eftermiddag. Och idag har vi, eller nu på förmiddagen, så har vi, tycker jag, ett jättespännande program om liquid biopsy, det vill säga blodprov för att kolla status på för drabbade på cancer. Så det ser jag fram emot.
Mm. Ja, tack för det. Och då går vi faktiskt över till engelska. Switching to English and see if that works as well. As we said, this morning session will be held in English since our speakers are English speaking. My name is Anders Albin, for you who didn't understand that before. I'm working at Palema's office and will be handling this morning session as moderator. And for those of you who didn't understand, you can ask your questions in the chat box to the right, and we will read them up for the speakers when it's time for the question and answer sessions. Well, that was that in English. Maybe you want to say something in English as well?
Yeah, I think we can bring up the agenda for the day. And the focus this morning is liquid biopsy, and then how to monitor and manage pancreatic cancer through blood tests. And this is for persons that has already been hit with pancreatic cancer, to see, for instance, if there is cancer tumors cells in the bloodstream, and that can help to heads up for recurrence. And also during treatment, it could be help to see if the treatment is working. So it's a kind of cancer marker. So that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. And I got interested in this actually when I was talking to patients in the US. I noticed that they seem to be doing regular blood tests. And then I was wondering, why aren't we doing that in Sweden? So I started to investigate this a little bit. And then I have been talking to professionals, and I have been talking to most of our presenters here today. And that has been very, very interesting. And they all agreed to come here today and tell us in Palema and everyone that is joining here today a bit more about this. So we're going to start after hearing my patient story first. After that, we're going to hear from Juha Kononen, doctor test, from an oncologist perspective, how he and they are looking at liquid biopsy. And then after that, at 10:15, we're going to have Signatera, Piotr here, and he's going to talk about Signatera, which is the blood test that I noticed that they are doing on a regular basis in the US. And Piotr, he is the representative here in Europe for this. So he will tell us more about that. And after that session, we will be listening to Simpson Diagnostics. So that's a startup company in Sweden, actually, that is also doing liquid biopsy testing. But they have a bit of another method for that. So that's also going to be very interesting to hear more about. And then we wanted to have someone to represent the Swedish public healthcare here, but they have been busy doing other things. So instead, we're very, very happy about that. We have Klaus Pantel here, and he's leading a very big program in Europe about liquid biopsy. And so he will tell us what's going on in Europe. And Sweden is part of that program, and Palema as well. So that's also going to be very interesting to hear more about. And then we will end up this morning sessions with a panel discussion with almost all the speakers. I think Juha Kononen will not be there at the panel discussion, so therefore we should take the chance to ask him questions before he leaves right after his presentation. So that's sort of the program for this morning. Did I miss anything, Anders?
Exactly. Thank you for that. And yes, you said Juha couldn't attend, and unfortunately not Piotr either. He got called away. So we will have short questions and answers for them after their sessions. And for the others, Camilla, Stefan, and Klaus, we will take that in the panel discussion at the end. And as you also see, we have a couple of sponsors today, Astellas and Beatrice, that we thank very much, because without them, we hadn't been able to do this webinar today, and they are sponsoring both the morning and the afternoon session. So we are grateful for that. So let's move on then, and you now can take on your patient hat instead of your presenter hat, Christina.
All right.
I want to hear a little bit about your story here. So I'm gonna put on your specific presentation. So there you go. All
right. Thank you so much, Palema and Anders, to letting me talk about myself. I will actually be focusing on the question, is there nothing more to be done? Because that's a question that has been hunting me all through my cancer journey. And today we have the Världspankreascancer Day. So it's really exciting to have the opportunity to talk to perhaps some professionals that's on this call, and the patients and others that are here. And we really need to do something together against this monster of pancreatic cancer. But first, a little bit about myself. And important all through my life has been to play with the ball. When I was younger, it was a volleyball, and nowadays it's a tennis ball. Some may call me pretty active, and I'm a person that no matter what, I will find a slot during the day for a jog. But I also love to be out in the nature and move around, and that could be on the snow or on water, on the playground, in the mountains or on ice. I would actually consider myself being a very healthy person. I've never ever smoked. I'm not into much alcohol nowadays, not at all. Has had a very, I think, healthy living, eating good, healthy, and now even more healthy. And most of all, we had no cancer in the family. There's nothing around me or above or so. Perhaps some generations far back, but nothing I've ever been thinking of. So then, what happens? Very unexpectedly, from sort of nowhere, I got hit with cancer, and not just any cancer, pancreatic cancer, one of the worst, one of the most deadly. Unbelievable. How did it all start? Well, most of it happened the year of 2023, but to be honest, I had some small sensations in my body a lot earlier. Really small things like light coughing that grow to some kind of reflux. So I was checking that up in the healthcare, and we could find nothing. So I let it stand like that. But it was a bit strange. So finally, I said to myself, I better check it up one more time. And I went to a gastric specialist. And he asked me lots of questions. And then I told him about the duck. You can see the duck there on the first picture. It's quite a big portion of a duck that I ate, all of it, very late one evening, and then went straight to bed. And that night, I had some stomach pain, maybe for 10, 15 minutes. I thought, well, that's no big deal. It's not so strange. Getting a pain when I eat meat so very seldom. But anyway, I told the doctor about that. Maybe that saved my life, because he said then, well, I think you better go and have an ultrasound. And I did a couple of weeks later in the morning, and the very same day in the afternoon, they called me from the doctor's office and said that it would be good if I could come in for an appointment as soon as possible. Strange. I did not think about cancer at all. But when I got to the office and met with the doctor, he told me that they have seen a change, something on my pancreas. And they had sent a emergency referral to Huddinge. What? And they sent me also to take a blood test for cancer markers. And this is the CA19-9 that is tracking pancreatic cancer. And that blood test did not show anything. So that was comforting. But at the conference that Huddinge had a week later, after I have also done a CT scan, it was seen that there was something that I thought was a tumor on my pancreas. So the blood test didn't show anything, but the CT did. So that marker is not working for me. But anyway, at that point, I didn't know, as you can see the statistics underneath on this slide, that at the point of being diagnosed with this cancer, the risk for not making it longer than 5 years is 93%. Luckily, I didn't know that then. But anyway, I had an appointment then with Huddinge, and I met with the surgeon, and he said, we need to do the Whipple procedure on you. And I said, yeah, okay, let's do it if you can fix me. And he didn't answer. He said nothing. And I can understand that he didn't answer, since after doing a Whipple, the risk for getting a relapse and not making it longer than 5 years is 90%. So of course I couldn't answer. But anyway, we decided to do the Whipple, and I was thinking, well, let's just do some more sit-ups, and I'm gonna before the surgery, so I'm prepared, and then it's gonna go smoothly. I'm just gonna make it. Little did I know, the Whipple is a big procedure. It took 5.5 hours to do that surgery on me, and the picture you see there is taken right after the surgery, maybe an hour later or so, when my surgeon is coming to me and he told me that everything has worked according to plan. So that was, of course, really nice to hear. And it was okay the first couple of days, but then my remodeled stomach started to complain quite a bit. I had awful time to eat, and I had nausea all the time, and it was really difficult to get food down through my new system. It wasn't that difficult to move around. I was walking the hallways to get going with the puke bag in my hand, and yeah, it was a hard time. It took a couple of weeks to let's say recover after the surgery. I was back home the 1st of April, so that was and the surgery was done in the middle of March. So the rehabilitation after the surgery was tough, and it continued for many months afterwards. And then after, let's say, 6 or 7 weeks, that's the normal procedure, I had the appointment again with the surgeon, and he told me that, yes, we have checked that your tumor that is now taken out. Yes, it was malignant. I wasn't surprised at that time. I hadn't understood and was sort of waiting to hear that. So it was malignant, and then chemotherapy is needed, and it was decided that I should do the FOLFIRINOX chemotherapy, and that's I believe the toughest and perhaps best chemotherapy that they have today. And we did, or I did, I should say we did, because there has been a team around me helping out with all of this all through 6 months of FOLFIRINOX, and that was 12 rounds. And the picture on me that you see here on the slide is when I'm taking the first round of FOLFIRINOX. I had lost quite a bit of weight, I think 7 or 8 kilos, and I'm not a big person to begin with. But anyway, here I am with this little bottle of 5-FU, which is one of the chemicals in the FOLFIRINOX brand that you bring home for 48 hours. So you sort of sleep with that bottle and walk around with that bottle. And I did that, or we all do that, who gets FOLFIRINOX as a treatment every second week so it's 3 days of infusion. When during this period, I was able to, as soon as my surgeon said it was okay, to go out jogging again. So after the first reappointment with him, he said, "Okay, you can go out if you use your common sense, don't go too hard if you feel any pain." So from the end of April, I was able to go on my joggings again on a regular basis, except when I had a needle in my port. The port is still in my body. They don't want to take it away after finishing the chemotherapy in case the cancer comes back. So it's here. I don't need to see it. Anyway, 6 months of FOLFIRINOX, it went very well. We together made sure I had as much dosage as possible. On the 5-FU, it's not possible to go 100% because I have this gene deficiency, DYPD, which is when you have that, it could be dangerous to go too high. So I had between 50 and 70% dosage on the 5-FU. When we did try to get high, my liver said, "Hey, stop! This is not so good to me." So some liver values got to be very high, and I had to do 1 week's rest during the treatment because of that. But other than that, the 6 months went well. And I also managed to, and I'm very proud of that, I managed to gain weight during this period, everything that I lost after surgery and a little bit more. And that was hard work because I didn't want to eat. My tummy wouldn't want to accept food. I was hungry, but had no appetite. So many days, most days actually, I spent perhaps 7 or 8 hours in front of a plate just to try to eat. And when I didn't do that, I was out moving around. So it was a lot of work during this time. And I didn't socialize much. I didn't want to meet people because I didn't want to get any bacteria or so to get sick and not being able to do the treatment fully. But when it all ended in the end of October, a couple of weeks later, when I figured that the immune system was back in business, we went out to a very nice restaurant and ate a avsmakningsmeny with 7 dishes of delicious food. And it was just wonderful. My appetite was back. And my daughter has arranged, so she has gotten the best bottle of champagne that this restaurant had. So I also had a little glass of champagne. And I'm so happy, and I was so about everyone that supported me, friends and family and loved ones. They did so much for me, gave me so much support and love. So I did actually not feel very stressed during this period because everyone was so nice to me. Anyway, now I have done on a regular basis every 3rd month CT scans or PT or PET CTs every 3rd month to check that nothing has come back, and I have had good results from this scan so far. So But there is a big but here. After all this, after this tough treatment, there is only 25% chance to survive longer than 5 years. Why is pancreatic cancer so behind other cancer diagnoses? So for me, that means that I cannot just relax and let it be. I need to understand more. I need to understand what this sickness, what's going on. What can I do? I need to have a plan B and C. My plan A is, of course, to stay healthy. Nothing more will happen. I will just continue to live. That's the plan A. Think positive. That's what everyone tells you. That's the best you can do. I do. That's my plan A. But what is my plan B or C if the situation gets worse? And of course, it's not so easy to have a plan B and C, because if there will be a relapse, you wouldn't know how, where, what. But at least it could have a strategy or some thoughts, be a bit proactive. So, of course, one of the first things I did, but it took some months, I joined Palema, and that's a wonderful group, gets so much support and help and hints. So that has been and is very valuable. But I have also joined other patients groups to check out what's happening, for instance, in the US. So I'm talking to patients there and I'm seeing what they are doing. For instance, they are doing liquid biopsy. We are not. Why? One important thing to do is to understand the tumor analysis, the pathology analysis that was done on the tumor that was taken out during surgery. And that's a document of many pages with very tricky medical terms. And I have been going through that one with, of course, help of physicians that could have explained it to me. I have asked many questions. And one thing leads to another. But anyway, I know from the tumor analysis and the discussions that I have the most ordinary PDAC that most of us have. It's the pancreatic ductal carcinoma. But I do have the adenosquamous version of that. And that's a version that might have a bit not so good prognosis, some say. But it also brings along very high PD-L1 levels. I have about 8%. That's very, very high. That could be good or bad. Bad is that that's a mechanism that is cheating the immune system. The good is perhaps that might be in immune therapy that can help. But immune therapy is nothing that is on a regular basis done in pancreatic cancer. But anyway, and then there is more information in this pathology analysis. So that's a good thing to go through. And another thing that I have done, and I think everyone should do, is to get a gene sequencing to get to know the mutation. And I then know that I do have a KRAS mutation, which is the most common one. More than 90% of pancreatic cancer patients have the KRAS mutation. And I have the G12D version of KRAS, which is also the most common KRAS mutation. Over 40% of the KRAS patients have G12D. But that's really good to know when searching for trials, matching trials, and there are numbers of ways to look for trials, and I have been trying several of those out. for instance, My Tomorrow, Anti-Cancer Fund, PanCan. There are databases on that as well. So that's a topic actually on its own, how to find trials. And we're going to do something on that in Palema further on. So stay tuned for that at the later Palema conference. I have also asked for several second opinions and then more second opinions on Plan B and C, since what they did at Karolinska Huddinge, that didn't need any second opinion. That was just the right thing to do. And I felt very, very safe in going along with the recommendations there. But now to discuss the future on that, I feel that I need second opinion. So I've been in contact with the Docrates, Christina Kliniken, and other sources as well to discuss that. Another source of information is the National Care Program, the Swedish guideline for pancreatic health care. And we also had, let's say, the opportunity, or we formed a small work group to go through the program in the beginning of this year. So I've read it line by line, and we also came up with lots of good improvement suggestions that we handed over to the leaders of developing that program. But that was also a very good learning experience. But anyway, from all this research and all this turning on stones, where we find some information that leads to another information, there are some key findings that I have wanted to discuss with the doctors at Karolinska, or get their opinions on, and questions to ask. So all through, I've had several appointments with different physicians at Karolinska. And that is, of course, a challenge because they are very busy to get appointments. But I must say they have really done their best to help out and been very kind and informative. So there's a very good relationship with Karolinska, I think. But anyway, back to the question, what more to be done? What have I found out? Well, frequent checkups is important, I think. And I would be very happy to also do liquid biopsy in these checkups. But what I do is every third month, it's either a CT or a PET CT. And that's a bit more often than what the standard and the guideline says. And the other thing is to find trials based on own biology. And I'm a so-called NED patient, no evidence of disease, luckily. So what I'm looking for is trials to prevent recurrence. And I have actually found a few trials. A couple of them are located in the US, so that's not really an option to go there when I also feel fine. But at least I have found those trials and discussed them. There is also a trial going on at Karolinska, but I'm not the patient that match that trial, since I'm now 1.5 years after surgery. They only accept patients right after surgery. I think that's going to come up in the afternoon, and Maximilian is talking about what's going on at Karolinska. Then we know, sadly, that there is no target treatment at all for KRAS in pancreatic cancer today. But there is, however, a pipeline There is something coming soon, perhaps, for KRAS G12C, but that's just a very, very small proportion of patients with pancreatic cancer that have that mutation. For KRAS G12D that I have, there is quite a bit in the pipeline in clinical studies, first phase, second phase, interesting stuff going on, but it will take time before it reaches us as patients. So we need to find trials if we want to get access to those treatments, because it's in trials that they can be accessed earlier. But we don't have any trials for KRAS in Sweden today either. Most of that is going on abroad, and most of it in the US, perhaps elsewhere in the world as well, but the most that I have seen is in the US. So we need to work on getting it into Sweden, and we need to do this together. So I'm doing my best to help out there, and that is, of course, then through Palema. So we try to do things together to help out. I think even the professionals want to have more here in Sweden. So we need to form a team together to get this going and work on it. There is also a view on all of this that I think is very interesting, because when asking professionals if we can do this and that, they often say, we have no evidence for that. There is not big trials that has been done so we can prove this. So we are not doing it. We are not even talking about it. But for us as patients, we may be interested in doing more, taking a little bit more risks. Best practice or best knowledge could perhaps be enough if there is a chance that something helps. And an example of that, and this is an easy example, that is defloratadine. There are some indications that the allergy medicine defloratadine may help. There has been some mice studies done on this, but no clinical studies yet. But anyway, from Palema, I heard about this, and then I did talk to the leading researcher on this initiative, and he did support taking defloratadine even if it's not recommended. So I take 5 milligrams in the morning, and I take 5 milligrams of defloratadine in the evening. There are no bad side effects, but it may help. So why not do it? And what can I do myself? Of course, keeping on exercising. Exercise is good, but I have also read somewhere that intense exercise, like sweating out the cancer cells, is a good thing. So I jog faster every once in a while, even though I love to jog slowly, because then I can just relax. Building muscles is good. Eat right is good. And that's a topic on its own for another Palema event. Most important is then, of course, to enjoy life. Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Final words. I'm very, very happy with what Karolinska Huddinge, Örebro has done for me, and the big team there. It's a big thank you to everyone. At the same time, there is a risk with this cancer. So if the monster comes back, I really hope for something curative in Sweden, not just chemotherapy until the body gives up. We need to work on this together. It's time for a change in pancreatic cancer care. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Very interesting. Let's see if we have any short question. Otherwise, we can take some more in the final session. So how do you feel today? Do you have any side effects, or how is it?
Well, I feel mostly fine after going through everything. I'm really happy about how I feel. I'm back to business, so to say. But mentally, it's a bit different. It's never going to be the same. It's Christina 2.0. That's so. I had neuropathy, the nerves after the chemotherapy, but that has gone away. I think perhaps also through going barefooted quite a bit and working with the hands. I did the hand exercises and stuff. So, but that's fine now. What can happen is that I get cholangitis attacks, which is inflammation in the gallgångarna.
Okay.
That has happened 3 times. It's really strange. And just getting fever and nothing else. The first time it happened, I didn't understand what it was. Fever without having a cold or anything. And then I realized this has to do with my tummy. So, and the liver values then was also very high. So that has happened 3 times, or 3 or 4 times after the surgery. As a reflux, bacteria is coming up in the gallgångar, the bile ducts.
Okay. Yeah. Good. But I also know that you train a lot. I guess you still do that after the surgery as much as you can.
Yeah. When my surgeon said okay to doing that, 7 weeks after the surgery, I started to go out jogging, and it was a little painful in the tummy in the beginning, but yes, almost every day. If I'm not playing tennis or being out in the nature, I could start play tennis after a couple of months. So I'm back. I'm exercising more nowadays than I did before.
Yeah. And I think exercise is important. We have written and talked about that earlier. So I think it's good. Not everybody may be out and running, but doing anything is good as an exercise, even if it's just walking or things like that. So thank you very much, Christina. And as any more questions, we can take them on the final question and answer session. So then we move on to our next speaker for today, and it's Juha Kononen from Doctortress. So please welcome up on the digital stage here, and I will take up your presentation. So it is ready for you. There we go. Hello, Juha. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, and thanks a lot, Christina, for sharing your story. It's very important to hear out the stories and patient perspective on things. That's what I think as an oncologist. And while every patient story is different, there are no 2 cancers that are completely alike. There are no 2 cancer cells that are completely alike, and no 2 patient stories are completely alike. I definitely recognize the many common things that I have heard from many of the patients that I've treated. And as it comes down to points like what can you do yourself, really the exercise is something that helps at so many different levels. It does so many good things on at the metabolic level on the body, and it does so many good things on also at the cognition and psychological well-being, that it's totally wholeheartedly recommendable. And the important thing is that not what you do, but do something that you enjoy doing. And for example, in terms of the neuropathy, the damage to the peripheral nerves that the chemotherapy agents do, doing exercise and walking and using your hands and feet in any way you can is definitely one of the best things that you can do, and that really does help out in reducing the side effects. But anyway,
the stage is yours, please.
I'm sorry.
No, the stage is yours now, so I leave you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll move on to my presentation, and the topic being on how liquid biopsy can be helpful for pancreatic cancer patients. Just a brief slide introduction slide on my background and where do I come from. So I'm a medical oncologist, radiation oncologist, and I have done genetic research in the past. So always been interested in incorporating all the latest developments into clinical practice at the point when they can actually be helpful for, not interested in science just for the sake of science, but how can we use this to help patients. And Docrates Cancer Center is located in Helsinki, Finland. We have a staff of about 100 professionals. We were recently acquired by Mehiläinen Group that's in Sweden, Meliva. So we're now part of that bigger network of professionals. But Docrates will be the cancer specialist group for Meliva and Mehiläinen Group in Finland and internationally. So we have around 100 professionals employed, and plus then more than 30 different consultants, specific experts on different disease entities. About 1,600 new patients annually, 19,000 patient visits, and we are well used to be an international hospital with patients coming from over 50 countries. And we do have natively Swedish-speaking doctors and nurses at our staff. I apologize for not giving the talk in Swedish. I do understand a bit, but being able to be way more precise in English, and that's why I wanted to keep this in English. Good news for I think for potential patients and our current patients coming from Sweden is that we are going to open up a clinic in Stockholm. This is a very, very new thing. Actually, the rental agreement was signed yesterday evening, so very totally new thing. We have our first oncologist starting in beginning of December. So there will be a location for Docrates in Stockholm. It's going to be located in the Kamla Karolinska facility. And what we offer for cancer patients is really bring the state-of-the-art diagnostics and treatments for private patients. And we do diagnose and treat all types of adult solid tumors, with of course the common cancers, prostate and breast being the biggest patient groups, but also lung, GI tract tumors, and rare tumor entities are cancer types that we try to help patients with. And we can offer help in multiple different situations, from the suspicion of cancer up to arranging for treatments and follow-ups and so forth. And the important thing that we try to bring to the table is that we are doing this together with the patients. We provide individualized diagnostics advice and treatments, and also actively enroll patients to clinical trials. There are currently 10 clinical trials that are running or planned for 2025. As for the pancreatic cancer specifically, I like to think that I need to be an optimistic oncologist so that I'll look for the future on how we can improve on things. And the good thing about medicine is that every year there are improvements. There is true and real development, and new things become available every year. And like Christina pointed out, knowing the biology of the pancreatic cancer is hugely important. That is the key to improving results and bringing better treatments. And KRAS is indeed one of the most common driver alterations and the major players as to why cancer develops and progresses. And the G12C mutation in pancreatic cancer is already druggable. We have actually treated a couple of patients with the combination of G12C targeting drug plus an EGFR antibody combination. So there is hope, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there are many pharmaceutical companies currently targeting KRAS, and there are some promising early results already presented. In addition to that, there are some other targetable alterations that can be used as a therapeutic target. But this is, of course, a topic of a different discussion. But things are going to improve on pancreatic cancer as well, finally. But now to this very specific topic of liquid biopsy. First of all, why is it important and study? The basic idea of a liquid biopsy is that the things that you can find in the blood, nucleic acids, other biomolecules, or cancer cells, that they could be used to detect cancer and follow up treatment response. That is the main goal of doing liquid biopsy. And by the way, what does a liquid biopsy mean? It's just a fancy word really for taking a blood sample. That's all it is. And some of the terms that are being discussed commonly in the field include cell-free DNA, cfDNA, or ctDNA, which means that it's a fraction of the cell-free DNA that's actually coming from tumor. So it's that is the circulating tumor-derived DNA. And then the term CTC can be discussed, and what that means is that when cancer cells, tumors divide, some of the cancer cells end up in the circulation. So you can find tumor cells in the blood. They may not totally reflect the total tumor entity within a cancer that's about 1 centimeter in size. There are 100 million tumor cells, and those cells that are found in the blood may not all be the ones that are actively dividing and growing and sending out metastases. But anyway, there are lots of tumor-derived material that you can find in the blood, and they can be used as a biomarker. And this has been of huge interest in the scientific community, and the number of publications on the field has rocketed since 2015 when the field really started off. And now 10 years later, we have thousands of publications on the topic and various different technologies and ways to analyze the data and data to support decision making as well based on the results of liquid biopsies. So the way I see it, there are a couple of different use cases for liquid biopsy. The one that's been used most often is that the situation when there is cancer, when we know that there are cancer cells in the body, so-called high disease burden situation, when there's metastatic cancer or refractory cancer that has already been treated with something, but the cancer progresses. So the basic idea is that all the different tumor and metastasis locations shed some of their tumor-derived DNA in blood, and then you can monitor what's happening in the blood. If the amount of cancer goes up or down, and that tells us if the treatment is working. So that allows a very dynamic monitoring of cancer. Then you can also analyze the shed DNA in detail to see if there are some emergent new mutations that could explain why the cancer is no longer responding to a given drug. So you can use that to find resistance mechanisms. And with initial pancreatic cancer, for example, sometimes you just can't safely take a biopsy out of any of the locations, but you can always safely take out a blood sample. So you could use it to really figure out what are the genetic driver alterations in the cancer. Is there anything druggable? Often in pancreatic cancer, there aren't anything druggable. The likelihood of finding a rare genetic alteration that is directly druggable is perhaps less than 5% in pancreatic cancer, but this is something that's very useful for many other cancer types. So that's the scenario where there's a lot of cancer, the high disease burden situation, but then the equally important now that the techniques have improved, liquid biopsies can help for early detection of cancer recurrence, or there's a lot of research and scientific interest in going into the question of, can we detect cancer early? Can we actually use liquid biopsies to screen and find the cancer before it has grown so much that it can no longer be operated, or before it has sent metastatic disease? And that is a goal that is becoming feasible. I dare not to say that it's there quite yet, but it's fairly close. So those are the two different scenarios where liquid biopsies can be used: high disease burden situation and low disease burden situation. And what's currently, I would say, for us is routine is the high disease burden situation. That's where we commonly do use liquid biopsies. So just to very short message of what liquid biopsy is. It's a blood test to check how much cancer there is somewhere in the body. It doesn't tell you where it is, but it says that there is cancer somewhere. And there are very many different techniques and approaches for liquid biopsy. It all perhaps started out of a digital droplet PCR that was utilized to look for known mutations and check for their presence, and thereby answer the question if there is still cancer in the body. The advantage of that is that's a very cheap technique, but the disadvantage is that the sensitivity is limited because you're just looking at one or two alterations, and they may not be even specific for cancer in all scenarios. So that true utility of that approach is limited. Then the next step up was to use next generation sequencing. That's what the term NGS refers to, and utilize a panel sequencing to find targetable alterations. And that's very useful for that reason, that you can, if there's a lot of cancer in the body, there's a lot of tumor-derived DNA in the blood, then you can use this to find those targetable alterations, and that can be very helpful, for example, in lung cancer, colorectal cancer. But its sensitivity is clearly not sufficient for detecting the molecular residual disease in many scenarios. One thing that I should have mentioned is that where does the DNA really come from, and the current understanding is that it is really mostly out of dying cancer cells. the rate where cancer cells die is related to the rate of how frequently they divide. So in other words, those cancers that proliferate and grow quickly, they shed more DNA into the blood, and therefore everything is easier for the more aggressive tumors that are rapidly growing. And for example, that's why cancers that show up in PET CT scans, which also detect metabolically highly active cancers, they usually can be detected in the blood as well using liquid biopsies. But there are some cancers that grow slowly, and the proliferation rate is very slow, and there the sensitivity of the liquid biopsy is probably not going to be enough to detect those types of cancers. Next step up from NGS panels was then the so-called tissue-informed NGS. So what that does mean is that the primary cancer sample is analyzed, and the patient-specific kind of a fingerprint of cancer is being formed, and then this fingerprint is then later on checked from the blood to see if the same alterations appear, that those same cancer-specific alterations appear in the blood. And currently, this is the most sensitive approach to detection of cancer in the blood. And it's very specific. If it comes up in the blood, it means that there are somewhere those cancer cells. It can't be coming off from normal cells. So that's good. The negatives are that it takes time to set it up, and it requires the starting tumor tissue to develop this for every patient. And because it's a lot of work, it can also be quite expensive to do so. The technology that is currently investigated really for screening cancer and early detection is so-called MCED tests, the multi-cancer early detection tests. And the advantage of that would obviously be that you would have a non-invasive early cancer detection without radiation exposure. But the difficulty there is that it's very hard to achieve the required sensitivity, and particularly this and the specificity. It's a technically very difficult task. Essentially, the current approaches utilize multiple different means of looking at how the DNA in the blood is altered, how it is tumorous DNA. So fractionation of the DNA, the methylation of the DNA are things that are taken into account. I would say that currently we're getting closer. Depending on the tumor type, the specificity can be quite high, above 80%, but the sensitivity tends to be a bit on the low side. But on the other hand, you could view that as that if it turns out to be positive, it means that now something might be wrong, and then it could be easier to justify and CT or MRI imaging to look for if there is a problem somewhere. So that's the summary of the different techniques available for liquid biopsy. Piotr from Signatera will be talking about this assay in more detail, but I'm just showing the principle of this here, and I won't go into details. I'll let Piotr explain that, but this is a test that we have been using for a while, the Signatera residual disease test, and our just to summarize the technicalities of the different tests with the brief statement that this is truly high-tech. This is very challenging to detect those minute amounts of cancer from a really very small blood sample, 10 mils of blood. That's not a lot. And it's actually a rather miraculous thing that this is feasible today. And the techniques are constantly improving, but limitations still exist, and one has to understand the technicalities of what goes behind the scenes to understand the utility of these these tests. So as I pointed out, we have been using this Signatera test for quite a long time now, and we've developed personalized tests for over 40, I think close to 50 patients, and have had so far a very good success rate for the assay development, and used this for multiple different cancer types: breast, melanoma, lung cancer, colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer as well. How I use this in the clinical practice is basically to answer to two different questions. First, is the cancer currently detectable? Is the test positive or negative? If it's negative, that to me that tells that there is no life-threatening disease somewhere. So it's a very relieving thing to see that coming out negative. It doesn't mean for sure that you're completely cancer-free, but at least there is no huge amount of cancer. There's no rapidly actively dividing cancer cell population somewhere. Then the other thing that I'm looking for is that whether the amount of residual cancer is going up or down. The half-life of ctDNA is very quick, between 15 minutes to 2 hours. So it's almost an instant evaluation, real-time evaluation of the overall disease burden. And that can be very helpful. For example, when we are starting a new experimental treatment, if it works, the ctDNA goes down in a few days. So you can get a quick readout of if the new treatment approach is working. There are some particular scenarios where this assay can be helpful, the early response evaluation, and then sometimes the imaging results are not so easy to interpret. For example, cancer lesions may be growing on the CT scan, but you're not sure whether that is a response to immunological treatments, because if immunological treatments work, there are more immune cells going into the tumor, and they can show up, look like they are bigger than what they really are. But if you measure the ctDNA, you get an answer whether there's cancer-derived DNA there. And all of this can be used to help in decision making, whether you need to intensify or if you can give a drug holiday, or whether your initial treatment strategy works at all. So a few patient case examples here. The one question is that at what level, at what ctDNA level is cancer detectable with imaging? Because it's often predicted that ctDNA comes first and imaging findings come later. So here's a patient example, a GI tract gastroesophageal tumor in this type with the multiple different cancer lesions, and then the bright color here in the liver shows multiple metastases. But 1 year into the treatment, this patient had an excellent response to treatment, and the PET scan was totally negative. ctDNA remained positive, but we couldn't see it on the imaging when the ctDNA was at that level point. Then we followed up the patient, and the ctDNA started to slowly rise, and at 5 mTMs per mil, we still couldn't see where it was coming from. But at the level of 76 molecules per mil, we could finally pick out that it was coming back in the lymph nodal areas, and those lymph nodes were biopsied, and the cancer was still found to be HER2 positive, and that impacted on how we treated this patient. But now on to a more specific pancreatic cancer example case. 77-year-old male, no family history of cancer, had a previous smoking history, 20 years of smoking, had stopped before diagnosis though, and his symptoms were typical for pancreatic cancer. Oftentimes there are no symptoms until the cancer is advanced. Here the symptoms started with the pain localizing to the upper abdomen, loss of weight, and then acute yellowish in the icterus is the medical term. And a tumor was found in the head of the pancreas, and then it was thought to be operable. Unfortunately, this was a July finding, and the surgery wasn't immediately available. It couldn't be scheduled due to the July vacation time in Scandinavia. So it was decided that he was going to start on neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And that's what we did. Abraxane gemcitabine, he wasn't fit enough for the FOLFIRINOX regimen. In the beginning of 24, he then went on to the surgery, and it was deemed to be a complete successful surgery. Margins were clear, but there were 9 out of the 16 lymph nodes were positive. So this was a very high-risk situation, and adjuvant chemotherapy was started with gemcitabine plus capecitabine, and we did develop a Signatera test from the surgery specimen. So right after the surgery, the test came out negative. No DNA. Everybody was glad. He received gemcitabine, capecitabine treatments, and even though they were tough on the patient, and we had to stop the adjuvant treatment after 3 months, and then we continued with active monitoring. So in May, whole body CT scan was clean, and the Signatera ctDNA was also negative, and the PET scan was negative. But in August, the first thing that came out to be positive was the Signatera that turned red and showed that there's something in the blood, 0.5 at that point. And we did a confirmatory reading followed, and that was also positive. So now we knew that something is wrong. And then at that point in time, the FDG PET also showed multiple small liver lesions, and the cancer had relapsed, unfortunately, and even metastasized at that time. So we started the patient on gemcitabine plus oxaliplatin, and did the gene sequencing, a typical KRAS mutated cancer, no currently targetable alterations. He has benefited from the treatment, and now just very recently the CT scan was inconclusive. Some of the liver lesions had grown, some had shrunk. So what we now decided to do is also take a Signatera assay to determine how does it look like with the blood-based measurement. So how does this, my points of discussion here, first of all, one message is that the ctDNA indeed did reflect the clinical disease activity closely, but we didn't get too much advance warning based on ctDNA. Once it was detectable in the blood, it was also already a metastatic disease. And there's probably this varies from patient to patient, to cancer, but how much advance warning you get from ctDNA, and probably the proliferation rate and metastasis location has impact on how well DNA is detected in the blood. But it could be useful now to differentiate between response versus progression, as CT shows a mixed response. And I will probably leave this topic to, for example, Klaus Pantel to discuss the early detection of pancreatic adenocarcinoma from blood samples, because there's a lot of research activity going on in that. There are some commercial tests that are available currently, and my main message there is that you can't really trust them to be 100% specific and sensitive, but if they turn out to be, if there's a signal of something abnormal, it should be followed up, and this can be sometimes useful to do. I'm seeing that I'm running out of my allotted time, so I'm not going to say too much about it, but the obvious question is how much better ctDNA is from the old markers CEA and CA19-9, and I think that ctDNA is significantly better, because while CA19-9 can be a good marker, but it can also indicate other types of cancer or certain non-cancerous conditions like obstruction of the liver bile ducts. And importantly, not all cancer patients will have elevated levels, and some cancers just don't produce this 19.9. And likewise, CEA, the cancer embryonic antigen, is not specific to pancreatic cancer and can be elevated in multiple other conditions. And more importantly, the half-life of these protein-based markers is way longer than ctDNA. They can be present in the blood for several days or weeks after something changes. So it's not going to be a good real-time evaluation of the disease situation. So in summary, what I think is that ctDNA can be a very useful tool, and with every tool you have to figure out how you're going to use it and understand the technicalities of the different assays. But it can be helpful for treatment planning and in particular for experimental treatments when you really want to know quickly what's going on, what's happening, and if you want to intensify or give a drug holiday. What's currently the bottleneck is that these assays are expensive and results are not immediately available, and that restricts the utility of the assays. But I'm hopeful that the techniques will improve in the future. So thanks for your attention, and I'd be open to all questions you might have.
Yeah, thank you. We don't have that much time, but I can take one quick question to summarize. Do you think that this ctDNA technique is ready today to kind of guide in the treatment of pancreatic cancer patients?
Yes, I do think so. But again, this is not ever to be interpreted in isolation. You have to figure out the everything. You need to consider all the symptoms, how well what is the current performance status, how the other labs look like, when was the last imaging done, and so forth. It's another tool in the toolbox, and as such, it's a very useful and helpful tool. But it's just one of the tools that we use.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're into the Swedish healthcare system, but do you have any hint of when they can start offering it in their toolbox?
Unfortunately, this is something that I do not really know how to comment on that. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions. If there are any, maybe we can relay them to you and we can answer them later on or something like that. So
anytime.
Thank you very much for attending today. Appreciate it. So we will move on then to our next speaker. So we please welcome up Piotr Guzenda from Signatera to talk a little bit about his topic here. So Piotr, please welcome up on the stage, and I will find your presentation.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Hello, there you go. So your stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for having the opportunity to speak a little bit about the Signatera solution today. I'm extremely happy, and the company is extremely happy that we work together with Dr. Kononen. Actually, what else can I say after this nice presentation on the data, how Signatera is helpful? But here I will speak a little bit about what is behind the test and what is behind the company as well, with a small pinch of some data. So this is the disclaimer about the test. So for you just to know what the company Signatera is, actually it's maybe even the biggest clinical diagnostic or laboratory in terms of analyzing circulating free DNA. So these particles DNA that are present in our blood. We have a number of clinical tests available a number of patents that cover our technologies, over 3,000 employees, and we are present in more than 90 countries worldwide. We have 2 laboratories in the United States that are CAP/CLIA certified laboratories. But for us, the science was always important, and we are happy that we have a lot of high quality publications, including the top journals, also the top oncology journals, where we can publish the data from our clinical trials. So speaking about Signatera, some MRD tests in surveillance settings, so why it is so much important? Of course, knowing early if there are traces of cancers present in our body can help the doctors, and we just heard that sometimes it's helpful to decide what to do if you are responding to a treatment, or if there's any further treatment needed, or escalation of the treatment, or if there are if there's any progression. And also, what is the MRD? This abbreviation stands for molecular residual disease. So these are the small traces of a cancer, such as a tumor DNA. Dr. Kononen just said that when the cancer cells dies, they release the tumor DNA to your bloodstream. So we can detect the very, very small amounts of this DNA in the bloodstream with our technology. And it's important because, as we already heard, also the imaging tools like CT scans, PET scans, or any other commonly used imaging tools may not be able to see such a small tumors that are releasing the small traces of DNA. So actually, what the Signatera is a tumor-informed, as Juha said, but it's custom designed for each patient. So what we do, we use tissue of your tumor tissue and your blood sample to identify the very unique set of tumor mutations that are very unique for this given patient and this given tumor tissue. And then we can analyze your bloodstream to track and to find those mutations in the bloodstream with a very, very high sensitivity. And if we do it in continuously in the time manner, we can then develop the nice graph so you and your oncologist can see what is the change of the amount of tumor DNA in the bloodstream. So what is the change of the tumor burden along all the treatment or along all surveillance monitoring. And then what you can get as the result, so you can get the positive result or the negative result. So the positive means that there's a higher chance that the cancer can recur. And if it's negative, it's more likely to remain cancer-free, or as Dr. Kononen said, there's no life-threatening disease there. What is important is to keep in mind that the power of circulating tumor-based MRD testing is to test continuously. So to keep monitoring, the cadence depends on the clinical situation, but for some cancers it's every 6 months, for example, to be able to track the change of ctDNA, or if the result is negative and constantly negative, then to be able to catch up the positive result as quick as possible, so to catch up the recurrence as soon as possible, while it's very often still not detectable on the imaging. So how this may help? This may help to assess the disease burden, to assess what is the dynamic of the disease. We show that in our studies and from everyday routine use of Signatera, that very often we can detect the positive signal of ctDNA much earlier than the tumor is visible on imaging, because particularly you need some size of the tumor to be seen on the imaging. And that activities brought us to a very, very broad clinical data across multiple tumor types. So, of course, including pancreatic cancer, but so far we tested, or we have over 6,500 patients across 30 tumor types. So we have a broad experience with the test. And, and nowadays we know that over 230,000 patients use this test in the United States, which is around 40% of all US oncologists are working with the test. And that's basically because they trust the technology and trust the clinical data that was provided by the test. But it's not only about the private coverage out of pocket, but in United States and some other countries across the world, also the data and the benefits that are brought from the Signatera test took the payers to cover the Signatera testing by a public insurance reimbursement, or the private insurers also are now more and more open to cover the costs of the testing partially or completely, which address a little bit one of these disadvantages that were mentioned, that the test may be considered to be expensive. So at this point, the coverage for the test is for colorectal cancer and the breast cancer, ovarian cancer and bladder cancer. So not yet for pancreatic. We hope we will be able to generate enough data soon. But also it is covered for every solid tumor, so included pancreatic cancer, for monitoring the immunotherapy, efficiency of immunotherapy. So this is a very broad coverage, and this also enables us to collect more and more data to deliver more consistent proof of the clinical utility of this solution. So just a quick brief, one of the examples, the very recent scientific paper published on use of Signatera in pancreatic cancer patients. And the quote from the authors of this study is that in the multivariate analysis, the ctDNA detection at surveillance was found to be the most significant prognostic factor for recurrence. So they, of course, looked on all the standard factors, also including the CA biomarker, but they found out that the status of ctDNA, so whether the patient had detectable or not detectable ctDNA, was the strongest prognostic factor for coming recurrence. So this is the data actually published this summer, so very strong and very recent data. So in the summary, I would say, Signatera, how this can be helpful for MRD testing with circulating tumor DNA, tumor-informed assay, is that there are three main questions to be answered, right? So if there is cancer left in the body after surgery, very important one to be answered, is the current treatment working? And then on surveillance, is the cancer coming back? More details how this can impact the treatment decisions, or how this can impact the overall management. I think the Kratos Center and then Dr. Kononen is the best address to ask, and the best source to get the best answer for that. So that's quickly about the test. I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, Piotr. Here we have this. A little bit questions and answers then. As I understand it, ctDNA technique today is primarily used to kind of monitor cancer in people that are already diagnosed. Do you see any future where you can use it to find the cancer in the first place?
Yeah, so the company is working now on the early detection test that is blood-based, so it also includes, among the other markers, also the presence of ctDNA. And of course, we utilize here our technology used for Signatera, being able to detect the very, very small amounts of tumor DNA.
That's cool. You mentioned, if I recollect, that some cancer diagnosis was covered by Medicare using this test. In which countries is that?
So Medicare is the US payer.
Oh, sorry, it's US. Yeah.
So this is in the US, but for example, in United Kingdom, the Bupa insurer also covers the Signatera. In other European countries, it was case by case. Patients were applying. We support patients in applying to a private insurer case by case, and in some cases they were successful to get the full coverage of tests.
Okay, yeah, because I guess they're quite expensive to do for a person, private person.
Yeah, it's not the price of the standard blood draw. Yes, of course, but I think the clinical benefits that also Dr. Kononen presented are also remarkable.
Would you say it's a good thing to everybody who has been treated for cancer to try to track ctDNA afterwards, or specific persons or specific genes or something like that?
I think I would not generalize that for every patient, because also in different tumor types, they release a different amounts of ctDNA, of tumor DNA to a bloodstream. So I think you cannot say that for every tumor type, this is the best solution, or for every tumor type that should be considered. But definitely there are some tumor types, like definitely the ones that I mentioned that are covered by the reimbursement. Like we are in a different group here, but for every colorectal cancer patient at every stage of the disease, it is recommended to track, because it brings the benefits to patient. So I think this is how I would answer this question. It should always be discussed with your oncologist, right? Who knows the best which type of testing, which type of tool is needed for this particular scenario.
Good, thank you. Can't see any more questions. Anybody have somebody? Write them quick, because you will not be attending the later session here. So, do you know if there is any kind of clinical trials going on with this? So that people can attend.
We run a number of clinical trials now. They are either driven by Natera, either driven by pharma companies, and we provide the test as a diagnostic tool. So there are a number of those available. I can share with you the list of the ones that we know, and you can share with the community. So, but I don't know which of those are open to recruit. I don't know which of those are open for example, Swedish centers and Swedish patients. But I can double check it later and send you specifically for Sweden or for Swedish patient. Is there anything open?
Great. I think Christina has some questions.
Yes, I was just wondering, Piotr, if you have any dialogue going on with the Swedish public healthcare system about your blood test?
With the Swedish public healthcare system, not at this point.
Okay. Could you say a little bit more on how accurate it is for pancreatic cancer patients? You were talking about different types of tumors. Are there a difference between the different pancreatic types? Because there are many versions within pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, so this is the publication that was focused more on being able to detect the recurrence, and I don't remember by heart the numbers, but definitely among all the standard markers that are used to monitor pancreatic cancer patients, ctDNA was the most accurate.
For pancreatic cancer?
Yeah, so the data I showed was for pancreatic cancer specifically.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And I can't see any more questions, so I think then we thank you very much for taking your time here today. Next day, Steve. Thank you.
That was my pleasure. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye. And then we move on to our next speakers for today, coming from Simpson Diagnostic, to also talk a little bit about their versions of ctDNA work. So, whilst they go on stage, I will take up their presentations here. There we go. Hello
Can
there.
you hear me?
We can hear you and see you perfectly.
Good. Yeah, hello everyone. I would want to start with saying that thank you for all the great presentations. I think this has been a super interesting morning so far. Hopefully we can also give some interesting information for you. But especially Christina, your story, your patient story has been very powerful. And I feel like after hearing your story, it really makes me feel that the job and the work that we do at Simpson Diagnostics actually can make a difference. So it feels very meaningful to be here today. So thank you for inviting us. So I'm Camilla. I'm the sales and marketing manager at Simpson Diagnostics. And together here I have our CTO, Stefan. Maybe you can just introduce yourself quickly.
Yeah, hello. I'm Stefan. I'm the CTO at Simpson. I'm responsible for all the technology development, and sort of in case there are any sort of more technical questions, I'm happy to answer them today.
Yes, and Stefan will be the one also being the panel discussion. I will be there too, but I think our scientific expert is the one having all the right answers. Yes, so in the upcoming 20 minutes, I hope I can walk you through what we're doing at Simpson Diagnostics. I think we're going to have a lot of repetition from the previous presenters here. We're doing quite similar things, but as they say, at least in Finnish, I'm a Finnish person originally, they say that the repetition is the mother of learning. So hopefully you will learn a lot from this presentation. So, Simpson Diagnostics is a research spin-out from Sahlgrenska University Hospital, which is the biggest cancer hospital in the Nordics. We were founded 2020 by 3 researchers called Anders Ståhlberg, Tony Godfrey, and Michael Kubista. And these 3 then developed something called Simpson-seq, which is a sequencing technique that everything in the company is based on. So as you hear, we're quite young, but even though we are young, we're part of a larger community. So we are actually based at the BioVenture Hub, which is a hub for startups within the life science sector. And we are based on the AstraZeneca site in Gothenburg. So we're part of a large network here. Also, I don't know how much you know about Gothenburg, but a few years back, they built this GoCo house, which is essentially like a connection point for all the life science industry and companies taking place here in the West Sweden. So even that we are still quite young and small and not as big as Signatera, so we're still we are part of a larger system. And as we all know, there's a lot of challenges within the cancer care. So there are three main challenges that we are addressing at Simpson Diagnostics. And the first one is the late detection of cancer relapse. So even though the patients undergo quite extensive screenings, the relapses are most often detected too late. Then there's this uncertainty of treatment efficacy. So methods to date are not good enough in seeing how the treatment or the drugs are affecting the patient in real time, or at least as quick as needed. Then the third problem is that the methods to date are not sensitive enough to detect remaining disease. And this is especially true after surgery, where you want to be sure that the tumor has been completely removed. And all these challenges could then be addressed by ultrasensitive monitoring of circulating tumor DNA. It's a long sentence, but I hope it makes sense. So we heard today what circulating tumor DNA is, but I'll just quickly go through from a marketer person's point of view what the ctDNA is. So when the tumors are growing, they release small fragments of its DNA to the bloodstream. And these small fragments then become the circulating tumor DNA because it's in the bloodstream. And that's why we can also detect the tumor from the blood samples. ctDNA is directly correlated to the tumor, meaning that if there's no tumor, there's no ctDNA. It is also a live biomarker, and by that we mean that it reflects the current tumor burden in the body. And also, if the tumor would be removed, the ctDNA levels would drop immediately thereafter. So, of course, at Simpson Diagnostics, we are detecting ctDNA, and our solution is called Simpson Personal because cancer is personal. And what we do is that we design patient-specific tests to any type of cancer, and this is then provided as a service. And these kind of patient-specific tests can detect cancer years before any standard of care tools like imaging. And our approach is used now at Sahlgrenska University Hospital, where one of our very close collaborators, Martin Dahlin, is using our technique to monitor all childhood sarcomas. This slide is here for explaining why the personalization is the key to the next level sensitivity. And as we heard from I think it was Juha presenting how this kind of personalized panels are different to other methods out there today. So this will be a bit of a repetition, but if we think about the traditional qPCR, there's only one marker that are monitored, which means that the sensitivity can't be that high either. Then there's these fixed next generation sequencing panels where you have a set of known mutations that you follow over time. The problem here with these fixed panels is that there's no guarantee that the actual patient has those known mutations. And what we do at the Simpson Diagnostics is that based on the tumor, so essentially our assays are tumor informed. So based on the tumor profile, we choose 20 to 50 different markers. And based on these mutations, we create a personalized panel where blood samples can then be tested over time to see how the ctDNA levels change over time. So the more molecules you can track, the more mutations you can include in the assay, and the more sensitive you can become. here are some applications of Simpson Personal. So it can be used for MRD testing, it can be used for treatment response monitoring, and also for second-line therapy response monitoring. And here is a slide on how the workflow works at Simpson Diagnostics. So with we start with the tumor sample. So we need a sample of the tumor, and based on basically we do a whole exome sequencing, and there we then see which kind of mutations there are, and then we choose these 20 to 50 different mutations that we find most valuable, and then we design something called primers. And then on this test tube, we can then test plasma samples from different time points. So it could be before treatment, during treatment, after treatment, to see how the ctDNA levels change. And out we then get biomarker, like ctDNA levels, and the current tumor burden, also the clonal evolution, and also exome data on the primary tumor. And as I have understood, it might be quite hard sometimes to get a tumor biopsy from pancreatic cancer. So we have a very smart way of designing our panel, and we can then choose kind of whichever markers that we find the most accurate for that specific patient, and then we can build the assay on that. So it could be any markers that we find beneficial for that specific person. So I just want to highlight with this that even that the personalization is the key to the next level sensitivity, we have also the possibility to tailor the assays to the needs of the customers or the patients. Also about the turnaround times. So what takes the most time here is the creating of the personalized panel. But then afterwards, when we get these plasma samples, we can get results of the ctDNA levels only in 2 days, which is quite quick turnaround times to be in this kind of setting. And I think this is very important when we then want to come to the clinics. It is also important to get these kind of results as quickly as possible. So that's also possible with us. Here, so far, like our main goal or our long-term goal is, of course, to come to the clinic, like be in the hospitals, that anyone has ever had cancer would be screened with the help of our technique. But the way there is quite long, and we hope we can quicken that time. And at the moment, we have been mostly working with the other biopharma companies who are developing treatments and drugs against cancer, so we can provide data to them how well the treatments are working. And also it's great to be here, since also Juha was presenting about Docrates and Mehiläinen, since we just during this year we have signed a collaboration together with Docrates, this private cancer center. And the main goal of this collaboration is to explore how our technology could be used in the clinical setting. So stay tuned on that. And of course, always when I'm talking with our customers or potential customers or anyone, any stakeholder, they're always asking, is there already some clinical data? And yes, there is. There is actually quite a lot, as we saw from some slide that these liquid biopsy studies has been grown in numbers so much during the past years. I will quite quickly go through three different cases, one from uveal melanoma, then from childhood sarcomas, and last but not least, pancreatic cancer. So uveal melanoma is a very rare type of eye cancer. And this specific study was published at Nature Communications 2021. And our CTO, Stefan, is one of the authors in this specific study. So he has all the knowledge about this. Here, ctDNA was used as a predictive biomarker. So if we're looking at the right-hand side, we can see that ctDNA negativity was predicting better survival, while the ctDNA positivity was not that positive in sense of the survival. Then there's childhood sarcomas. As I mentioned previously, we have already our technology used at the in Sahlgrenska University Hospital, where childhood sarcomas are being screened. And this specific study is now highlighting that how much earlier ctDNA tools or ctDNA analysis can detect cancer compared to the clinical presentation. And here the clinical presentation means imaging, which is the red line in the middle. So there's, at that time point, there has been an imaging taken from the patients. So if we look at the picture on the right-hand side, on the upper side, so we can see ctDNA being detected 9 months before imaging. And if we look at the picture underneath, we can see that they have been using some kind of protein marker, which has not shown a relapse. And it only showed it like just some months, some weeks before the clinical presentation. So this is just to highlight how much earlier you can detect cancer with the help of liquid biopsies and detecting ctDNA. So yeah, I'm leading to the end of the presentation, but I just also want to mention that we believe at Simpson Diagnostics that great science is done in collaboration, and that's why we really want to get our nets all over Sweden and abroad, because we believe that there's great things to be done all together. We have also been quite good. We're quite successful in attracting soft funding, which has enabled us to test our solution, our technology in very different kind of applications. For example, within the forensics and also in environmental DNA. But our main focus is in the cancer field, and we really want to make a difference there. If there's something that I want to send out to you from this presentation, so there's three things. ctDNA is the most accurate biomarker to date, and by this I mean that ctDNA is directly correlated with the cancer. So if there's no tumor, there's no ctDNA. Also, ctDNA is to date the best predictive biomarker that we have. Then I absolutely think that you should choose Simpson Personal because cancer is personal. And with this, I mean that there's in this assay, we have a lot of flexibility and a lot of possibilities to tailor the assay exactly towards your needs. And to send out and finish this presentation, I just want to say that detecting the smallest changes can make the biggest difference. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Let's see if there is any questions. We have planned this little panel discussion after the next speaker, so maybe we can save them until then, if that's okay. I don't have anything in the chat right now anyway, so yeah, so maybe we will move on and see you soon again in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's see if our next speaker actually is ready. It's a little bit ahead of scheduled time. But I see that you are there, Klaus. I hope you are there. Yeah, you are. Great. Welcome. And then I will take up your presentation meanwhile. So let's see if you can get your camera and microphone working also. That would make it a little bit easier. As always, technique is exciting, especially when you're doing live broadcasts.
Okay.
Now we're getting somewhere. There you are. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. Great. I know. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, yeah. It was a little bit flickering in the beginning, but there you go.
Great,
So,
excellent.
Please,
Well,
the stage is yours.
Thank you, Anders. Well, it's really my pleasure to present here a 20 minutes talk on the early detection of minimal residual disease or early relapse, MRD, in cancer patients using liquid biopsy, which is really the topic of my research over the past decades. Next slide, please. This is my disclosure information. Next slide, please. The liquid biopsy concept has been introduced by Katrina Lix-Panabier from Montpellier and me in 2010 as the analysis of circulating tumor cells in the blood of cancer patients. And quickly it has been adopted to the analysis of products released by tumor cells, in particularly DNA, but also RNAs or extracellular vesicles. And now we have also enlarged this concept to the analysis of host cells, such as immune cells or endothelial cells or fibroblasts in the blood. What is the rationale? Tissue biopsies are the gold standard for cancer diagnostics, but they are invasive and some locations are difficult to access. If you access a single location, for example, of a metastasis in the skin or in the liver, it may not represent the metastasis locations in other organs because there is significant intra-patient tumor heterogeneity. In contrast, the blood is a pool of tumor cells and products released from all sides potentially, and we get more comprehensive information. And most importantly, we can take sequential blood samples from patients without harming the patient, and we can do that for real-time monitoring of tumor evolution and therapy responsive, and that's much less invasive than taking sequential tissue biopsies. And that can all lead to the possibility to do a surveillance of what's going on after the initial therapy and use it for early detection of minimal residual disease or relapse months before imaging. So the vision is to get more comprehensive and real-time information by the analysis of blood, and I focus on blood today, but we can also analyze other body fluids. Next slide, please. The two main analytes for liquid biopsy analysis are ctDNA and circulating tumor cells, CTC. Circulating tumor-derived DNA are small fragments, and there are two main approaches to detect them. We can use hotspot gene panels that encompass the main mutations of a given tumor type, or we can actually sequence an individual tumor of a patient and then develop probes that are patient-specific. For the CTCs, we can enrich and identify the CTCs at the single cell level, and they occur at low frequencies in the blood. And we can also perform downstream analysis at the DNA, RNA, and protein level. And for functional analysis, we have developed cell lines. Next slide, please. Let me focus quickly on the circulating cell-free DNA. Why do we find DNA derived from tumor in the blood? The DNA is usually in the nucleus of cancer cell, but when the cancer cells die, they can release the DNA into the blood, and here the DNA is diluted in a sea of normal DNA released from other organs. So we also have to develop very sensitive methods to detect the tumor-derived DNA in the background of normal DNA in the blood. Next slide, please. In order actually to implement research discoveries into the clinic for the benefit of cancer patients, we have developed a consortium called the European Liquid Biopsy Society, which has now members from academia and industry. We are now more than 90 institutions already, mostly from Europe, but also from Asia, US, and Canada. And we have 4 working groups. One is on dissemination and education. The next one is on the clinical questions that are relevant and important to address. The third one is on the technologies that are able to address these questions. And the fourth one is on regulatory issues, which means how to get these assays reimbursed and convince the healthcare givers to support these liquid biopsy measures. Next, please. So I will focus today on the detection and surveillance of cancer patients after initial therapy and the early detection of relapse. Next slide, please. We have shown already in various solid tumor types, breast, bladder, head and neck, testicular, colorectal, Merkel cell melanoma, but also, of course, on pancreatic cancer, which is, of course, the key focus today, that the detection of circulating tumor cells at primary diagnosis is related to metastatic relapse and unfavorable overall survival. So we could use that actually to do better staging and better risk assessment of cancer patients. Next slide, please. This shows really the evolution of tumor development for cancer patients. After the initial therapy, the tumor burden goes down, of course, because it has been reduced, for example, by surgery of a pancreatic cancer. Then there is usually some residual tumor load that is left over, probably as metastatic or micrometastatic disease in the peritoneum, in the liver or other organs. And this micrometastatic disease can then grow on again, and it can become minimal residual disease. And with the liquid biopsy, we can detect this residual disease earlier, and we are more sensitive than the imaging. So we have now here a window of opportunity for post-adjuvant therapies. And I think this includes, of course, the possibility of immunotherapies and targeted therapies, of course. Next slide, please. This is a bit complicated picture. It shows the same as before, but it also shows you that the evolution and the relapse of a cancer disease as metastatic disease depends, of course, on the initial reduction of tumor load. If you have a very effective way of reducing the tumor load, then you have a steep decrease in the number of tumor cells in your body, of course. And then the tumor cells may regrow. This is what you see here, a regrowth. And depending on the host control, whether your body can control these tumor cells well or not well, you can have a different recurrence time. So you may recur very quickly if the host control is weak, or you may recur after a later latency period if your host control is very strong. So the fact, or let's say the decision when relapse occurs depends on the cytoreduction of your tumor load, but it also depends on the control of your body, for example, the immune system. Next slide, please. This is also here shown for the circulating tumor cells. You have circulating tumor cells. These circulating tumor cells can grow into different organs, for example, in the liver. Here they can grow and become micrometastases, which are detectable now with liquid biopsy methods. But you also have single tumor cells that may be in an active growth phase, or they may be in a more dormant phase. So biologically, it's a complex disease. And we use now liquid biopsy to actually find out which of the tumor cells that are residing in the body are active and which are more dormant and which have a more aggressive stem cell nature. Next slide, please. We are very happy that the European Union is actually supporting a consortium of 22 partners all over Europe. These are also partners from academia and industry that work together to find out which ctDNA assay is most suitable for the detection of MRD. And we do that in 3 tumor types, in pancreatic cancer, of course, but also in colorectal and lung cancer. And we want to integrate this at the end as a decision tool to guide treatment selection. Next slide, please. These are the clinical studies that we do in the Guide MRD project. We have, for example, the study on pancreatic cancer that includes stage 1 to 3 pancreatic cancer, overall 184 patients, and it is a prospective observational clinical trial. What we will do is we will actually test different ctDNA assays which have been actually used and are commercially available. We use them side by side, and then we will see which of these assays gives us the best information when relapse occurs months before imaging. So we want to know which of these assays is suitable for early detection of relapse, because then we may be able to act with an intervention earlier than we wait until we see metastasis in the imaging. The same will be done for colorectal and lung cancer, and then we will compare our best assays to the clinical standard and design also a randomized interventional trial where we actually do a treatment based on the measurement of ctDNA in the blood. Next slide, please. This shows it in a little bit more detail. We actually take the blood samples before surgery, but also after surgery, which is most important to measure residual disease. And then we take blood samples during the follow-up period, and the patients will receive standard of care treatment. And we will see how quickly do we detect relapse with the ctDNA compared to the normal imaging follow-up procedures. Next slide, please. Just to show a little bit of activities beyond pancreatic cancer, we also have a study running on breast cancer. Here, this analysis has shown that you can detect residual disease many years after primary diagnosis. In this case, it was 8 years after primary diagnosis. 10% of the patients were positive for ctDNA, suggestion that there is micrometastatic disease in these patients, non-detectable by imaging. And indeed, we could detect here ctDNA about a year earlier than imaging in these breast cancer patients. Next slide, please. And that shows that we can do similar thing with the circulating tumor cells. Here also we could detect circulating cells 2 years after adjuvant therapy. And these circulating cells are not derived from the primary tumor, they are derived from occult micrometastasis, and they're correlated to a poorer overall survival and disease-free survival. Next slide, please. We have now, based on these data, initiated a large multi-center interventional trial, the SURVIVE trial, where we actually enroll 3,500 cancer patients. Half of them will be actually followed up according to the standard and the guidelines, and the other half will be actually followed up by liquid biopsy blood analysis, and we will see whether the blood analysis leads to a better outcome for the cancer patients compared to the standard follow-up, and we will include circulating tumor cells, circulating DNA, but also protein markers. And this might be a nice example of an interventional study that could also be interesting for other tumor types, such as pancreatic cancer. Next slide, please. Just to show you that we may not be able to detect all of the relapses equally well. Here in the breast cancer study, for example, we could detect the distant metastasis very well with the ctDNA assays that we used. And we have used a tumor-informed and a tumor-non-informed assay. But the local relapses were not so well detected. So that shows you that the ctDNA might be better for detecting relapse in some organs, but maybe not so good for the local relapse in this case. So there are different shedding rates of the ctDNA depending where the tumor cells are located. Next slide, please. Besides Measuring the tumor burden, we can also look at characteristics of the tumor DNA and tumor cells. And this is important for actually getting information on potential therapeutic targets and resistant mechanisms, because we want not only to say there's a higher risk for development, but we also want to say how can we block the development to overt metastasis. And at the ctDNA level, we can look at genomic changes relevant to treatment decision, for example, mutations in the KRAS genes, or we could use also the cells to look at proteins expressed on these cells that are relevant for treatment decision, for example, the expression of the HER2 protein or the expression of the PD-L1, which is important in immunotherapies. Next slide, please. And immunotherapies are, of course, not introduced in pancreatic cancer today, but I mean, there's a lot of development going on, and the Nobel Prize was awarded for this therapy in 2018. And here, what we are doing is we look at the tumor characteristics. So we look at the characteristics of the circulating tumor cells and the circulating DNA and combinations of both, which gives us some idea why patients can respond or why patients are resistant to this therapy, and that may also help to improve these kind of therapies for pancreatic cancer. And we also look at the host, because also the immune response, but also the composition of the patient's body can be very important to fight these cancer cells and really respond to the immunotherapy, which I think is also not fully understood yet. And we do that in collaboration with Tatsuko Honjo, who is the Nobel Prize, one of the 2 Nobel Prize winners for this type of therapy. And we just had the opening ceremony of his new cancer center, the CCII Cancer Center in Kyoto, Japan. So I just returned from that. Next slide, please. And that was really the opening ceremony we had a few days ago in Kyoto. And I was very honored to speak at this very prestigious symposium. Next slide, please. So I think we are all believing that we probably need to combine different markers to get more comprehensive information. So just to show you one of our new studies on the multi-omics liquid biopsy, the next slide, please, which is the PANC8 study, which is a study of a European study, which is funded by the European Commission again. And this time it's on early detection of pancreatic cancer. I'm coordinating that together with Matthias Löhr from the Karolinska Institute. We are 17 partners from the EU, UK, and Israel. And we have here blood banks from patients with early stage pancreatic cancer, but also from patients at risk to develop pancreatic cancer. And we have experts from all liquid biopsy fields, including the CTCs, the ctDNA, but also proteins, extracellular vesicles, metabolites. And I think we will bring that all together using artificial intelligence methods to develop, hopefully, a classifier for early detection of pancreatic cancer, which, of course, I don't have to explain why that is an important goal. And these can be probably then also used for early detection of relapse, because if we are detecting pancreatic cancer early with some composite biomarker test, then we may also use that for the surveillance of pancreatic cancer patients. And in this project, I should also emphasize that we have experts on health economy evaluation, which is important to implement that later on in the clinical setting. And we have a very active patient organization, the PCE, which contributes a lot to this project. The next one, please. Just to show you how this field is developing, this shows you that we can now detect more than 5,000 proteins in 1.5 milliliter of blood. And these proteins were actually enriched from extracellular vesicles, which are very small little vesicles that are released from tumor cells and normal cells into the blood. And using proteomic mass spec analysis, we can really detect a whole variety of these proteins And you can imagine that if we do that from a certain number of patients before and after therapy and during the surveillance, we will get a good idea what changes in the tumor cells, but also in the patient's host response is relevant to the relapse. And maybe this information could be also used in the future to develop new therapies. And we did that also in the context of a Marie Curie EU-funded network. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the early detection of primary cancer, but particularly also the detection of MRD and relapse, requires very sensitive assays. Usually we need to detect these cells at concentration below 1 in 100,000. Tumor burden and molecular characterization of alterations relevant to systemic therapy can be detected. And I think it might be also important that we are using now these blood tests to monitor the response to therapy, and we want to expand on the RECIST criteria, which are currently based only on imaging, to include the blood analysis into these response criteria. The assays need to be validated and harmonized. We have the ELBS that has done already quite some work because we need to have accurate assays, and the assays need to be really suitable for this analysis. The combination of different liquid biopsy markers may lead to higher accuracy because we may see different facets of the cancer development and the relapse development. And the resistance of immunotherapy may depend on both the tumor and host response, and we still want to understand what is going on in pancreatic cancer. Why are the immunotherapies not working so well, and how can we change that in the future? And last but not least, interventional studies are important to demonstrate the clinical utility of liquid biopsy. So we have to design also studies where we change the patient management and treatment based on the blood analysis, and that needs to result in the benefit of the cancer patient, because just to tell the patients that there will be a relapse occurring is not, of course, sufficient. We have to also interrupt this development and still have the chance to prolong the life of cancer patients. Next slide, please. At the end, I would like to acknowledge our network here at the University Medical Center at the UKE. I'm also part of the Comprehensive Cancer Cell Editorial Executive Board, and I'm leading the Institute of Tumor Biology. And this is really a network combining clinics and research institutions. So it's a true translational network, and this is very important to achieve our results. Next slide, please. And this is our team at the Institute of Tumor Biology. We are 40 researchers from 18 different nations, a bit like United Nations. And we are very grateful for the support from the European Union. So the European Union has supported my ERC grants, but also the Horizon grants that I showed today. And I'm also grateful to the German research organizations that support my work, like the GFG, the Minister of Research, and the Deutsche Krebshilfe. Next one, please. This is the last one. If you are interested in liquid biopsy, we are organizing a wonderful meeting next year in the south of France, in Nice, in May, which is co-chaired by Katrina Lix-Panabier from Montpellier and Paul Hoffman from Nice. We have excellent speakers from all over the world, and abstract submissions are open, and of course, you are also invited to attend. Also, if you want to join the European Liquid Biopsy Society, we are open for new members anytime. So please write me a mail if you're interested to get more information. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Klaus. Very interesting. So let's see if we should then go on to the final part, and that's actually a little bit of a panel discussion. So if anybody has any questions now.
Well, let's see if we also have Stefan and Camilla here.
Yes, we can also ask Stefan and Camilla to go back.
Yeah, if you can join us for the panel discussion.
Yeah.
Here.
And hello.
Hello.
So I just want to say thank you so very much to for your presentations and for the very, very good and important work that you're doing. I'm getting actually very touched because I'm a patient, and we really need what you are doing. I'm getting very touched because we need it fast. And I'm in the situation that I would want to do these blood tests now. I want to see if I have any circulating DNA or bad cells in my body, and then I would want to do more treatment. I really want to know. So my very first question is very much to reality. When do you think we have something that can be useful in clinic for us patients?
Maybe I can get started because you mentioned the blood test. I think the key is really for us to show that we can measure today your blood and we can detect tumor cells or tumor DNA. But then the key question is, what kind of treatment should we then use, right, to change the course of the disease and kill these cells? And this can be only answered in interventional clinical studies, which we are going to do in the next years. So we are now at a point where we can tell you, yes, your treatment may not work very well because we find, let's say, tumor cells, right? But we cannot tell you what other treatment you should use to change that. And that is still a limitation. But it's always like that, you know, the diagnosis always precedes the therapy. First, you have to learn what's going on in the body and you have to diagnose it. And then you have to develop the right treatments against it. So it's always a bit of a lag period, which is very, let's say, how should I say? It's a bit depressing because you can measure bad things first before you can eliminate the bad things. Huh? Yeah.
Okay, but then it's interesting to understand how come that they are doing the blood tests in the US and the insurance company are paying for it. And I guess they're doing that because they see that there is something good coming out of it. And perhaps if just knowing that there is something bad going on in your body, you could perhaps give what we have today, like chemotherapy.
Yeah.
For pancreatic cancer. No. For other cancer diagnosis, there are more things they can do, but for us.
No, I fully agree with you. I think that it's a matter of, how should I say, in Europe, at least I can say that, and for Germany, we want to know everything before we get started. In the US, people are a bit more pragmatic. It's another philosophy. People say, okay, if I know that my treatment and my disease is going in the wrong direction, I will change something. Yes, I don't know whether this change will be better, but at least I have a chance, right? But in Europe, we really want to know everything before we get started. So it's a bit of, you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a different philosophy behind it. And if I would be a patient, I would be also unsatisfied with this kind of waiting until everything is known and perfect. Because as cancer patients, we don't have the time to wait. Huh?
Exactly. And I would say what you're saying there about the difference between the US and Europe, that's not us. That's not us patients. We are willing to take a little bit more risk if there is a chance that we can be helped. It's about our lives. It's not about regulations being very, very safe with all the paperwork and everything else and everything in 100% proved. If there is something that can help, we are ready to utilize it.
Maybe we can also say something from the company perspective, because I think that's true for most people. I think researchers are like Klaus, you're ready to do a study, but you need funding. The patients, you're ready to go because your life depends on it. And we as companies, I mean, we're also ready to go. But it is unfortunately the case that when we want to develop a product, and we want it to be in the public healthcare system. It takes many years and a lot of money and resources that small companies like us also need to build up first. So we can use our technique in the clinical trials, in studies, when it's basically research, but that only benefits patients when it's really late, when their standard of care doesn't work anymore, they get enrolled in a trial, then maybe there is space for exploratory biomarkers, or when it's in the private setting, like with Socrates. But until it gets into the public healthcare system, we also as businesses, we have to jump through a lot of hoops, and like Klaus said, we have to prove everything, and it has to be a tidy package, and it's a very large package before we can get the product in the public health system until it gets reimbursed. And I mean, we're trying to speed it up, and I think it's important that there's pressure from every side. I think it helps also if it's maybe unfair also for the patients to put pressure on the healthcare system, but because it's also about education, right? There needs to be a need, so that the funding agencies also provide funding, that clinicians also request things, because I think it's important so that everybody is sort of aware that this is a thing, and that the system starts to get moving. It's a very slow moving system, but once it gets sort of moving, maybe it will go forward.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we need you. We need the patients, really. I mean, there's a lot of writing by many funding companies that patients' organizations need to be involved in trials, which is very good. But I think we need you for policy making. I mean, in Germany, it's the same, like you said, it takes forever before things are implemented in the reimbursement system. And I don't see patient organization in this discussion. I see just, let's say, professionals from different areas that want to protect whatever is in there, right? And of course, the patient, let's say the imaging companies who are in there, they don't want any new tests because they say it may be competition. The pathologists may fear of the blood test because maybe then they don't want to do the tissue analysis anymore. So there's a lot of, how should I say, discussions based on everything, but not on the benefit of the patient. And the patient should be more active, because the patient are really the advocates which have no conflict of interest. You only want the best for your health, right? I mean, the researchers can be maybe too greedy. The companies can be, they can have a conflict. Everybody can have a conflict, but you are the ones, I would say, with the purest mind, because, I mean, nobody will argue that you want to have the best treatment for your cancer. So I really champion this very much, not just as on my lips, I really mean it. We need to have you as patient organizations, addressing that to the policymakers. I mean, you have the purest ambitions here and the clearest ambitions. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I mean, for us, it's about survival, and it's so important.
Exactly.
And we are here to help out. If we can raise our voices even more, we love to do that, because it's so key important. And we hate to hear about the bureaucracy and the competition between different fields and such things. We just want it going. And it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. You could do this in iterative steps. If there is something that is sort of starting to work, give it to us, because it will help. We don't have to wait until it's 100% evidence proof. We need it quicker than that. And in my discussion with Dr. Kononen earlier this year, we were talking in a private meeting. He said that if he was in my shoes, he would want to have treatment if there were 2 positive tests showing that I have cancer tumor cells in my blood, and I would want to have that too. It doesn't have to be 100% perfectly proven. I'm prepared to do more of this awful chemotherapy to have a chance to live longer.
I should also comment about you saying we patient and patient organization raising our voices. I'm actually looking right now on television where our chairman and one of our co-founders is sitting talking about pancreatic cancer and the challenges. So we at Palema are trying to reach out. We also have 2 debate articles today in different papers. Our chairman will be in the radio this afternoon, so we are really going all in this pancreatic cancer day to raise awareness of this disease.
And you have a very good point, Anders. I keep saying now in my talks usually that pancreatic cancer in 2030 will be the 2nd leading cause of cancer-related deaths in Europe, okay? And it's not only in Europe. I was in Australia a few weeks ago, the same in Australia, the same in the US. So that scares people, and that's good, because we need to do something against that development, right? And everybody is afraid of getting pancreatic cancer. I mean, there's not a single living and thinking individual on this earth, who is not scared about that. So you have a very important tumor type, and you have a very strong case here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we appreciate everything really that is being done, but we want it to happen faster. So back to the question, I think I'm asking you, Klaus, because you have a very, very good overview from all the work that you have done, and also with the European different groups that Sweden is part of. When do you think we have liquid biopsy ready to go for us patients in Sweden?
Well, I think that it really depends on the tumor type, For pancreatic cancer, I would imagine to have a test that gives you good information whether you have an increase of relapse or whether tumor cells are left over in your body. That, can be done within the next few years. I'm very sure about that, because the assays are there. They need to be maybe more tested and validated to be sure that they produce the right information. But there I'm very optimistic. And I guess, then, of course, there will be a stepwise integration. I fully agree with you. We have to get away from this concept that everything needs to be perfect before we start. I have two grandchildren now, right? When they start to crawl or start to walk, nothing is perfect, right? But
Exactly.
after a few months, it looks great, okay?
Yeah.
So it's very unnatural to say everything needs to be perfect before you start. This is not how nature has developed us. Absolutely.
No, very, 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 very well said. We can learn as we start to go.
Exactly.
And so we can do clinical studies in reality, if you will. We put it that way also. So, but then another follow-up question on that. Would you think with that approach that what we have today could be put into more common use in clinic or at least some setups, because this liquid biopsy technique and the benefit it will bring is good enough, the good enough thinking. Are we there today?
Well, I think if you really want to know whether there is a very high risk to develop relapse and whether there are tumor cells left in your body, not killed by your current treatment, these tests, I think, are available and they work well. What we cannot guarantee is if you, based on these tests, get additional chemo or other therapy, that these cells will go away. That's something we cannot guarantee you today, okay? But if you say, okay, for me, it is enough to know that there are cells there and that my therapy that I received so far did not, eliminate these cells, and I have another option, which is also important to have another option, right? Then I think it makes sense to me. And what I usually do is I discuss that with the patient, but also with the treating physicians, because I think it's also important that the treating physicians are really included in that discussion, so that the patient is not just left alone with this test result, right? So I think that's why also the education is so important to us, to make clear, that we don't leave the clinician or the patient alone with such a result, but that we explain what can be the potential consequences of it, right? Sometimes the potential, if there's no other treatment available, a potential consequence can be also a more dense, maybe scanning, or more dense control or whatever. So I would say that this can be discussed at an individual basis, which I think is great to include the treating physician and the patient in that. But to me, it's very important that we give very honest information to the patient so that the patient can make a decision, right? A decision based on evidence and not just on belief or whatever, And me, if I'm a patient, I would also like to have the evidence and then make a decision, right? Maybe some patients prefer if the doctor makes the decisions for them, but I have actually many good discussions with patients in my life where the patients understand very well what are the potential and the limitations of these tests for their individual tumor. So I feel that we should, as physicians, I'm also an MD, we should not be afraid to include the patient in this decision-making.
Thank you. I think that was very well said, and I'm fully on that page, and I would want to get to that, and I think I'm not alone. In pancreatic cancer, there's not very much of a personalized treatment that you can do nowadays.
Yeah.
There is a few percentages that has targeted treatment,
Right.
perhaps working for them. The rest of us have nothing. But here, there is actually something that can be done. So if in my case, for instance, if I would see that there is a positive liquid biopsy test, then I would want to discuss with my oncologist, what are we doing now? And it could be an open discussion, exactly as you said, and I would want to be part of it. And then we talk about, okay, I don't want to do anything, or most likely I would want to do anything to avoid to getting an awful relapse, because a relapse today in pancreatic cancer, that means you're going to get chemo, and in a very late stage, when you have metastases that are too big, maybe, and you see it on the screen when they had grown so big. But with the ctDNA, a liquid biopsy, you see it a lot earlier, before it has started to grow. It's obvious that you then would, for an ordinary person without medical background, that you're just thinking that it must be easier and a better chance to treat it before it has grown to something really, really bad that could make a big difference and end my life. So I think we need to hurry up here and not be so very restrict with all the bureaucracy and all the decision making and all of that. We need to get going. And I want to talk to my oncologist about the situation if I see that I'm at risk. I don't think I'm alone in that.
No. Exactly. We have a couple of...
This is a pancreatic cancer day, so I think I'm allowed to speak up like this.
Absolutely.
This could be a bit of a personalized way of treating in a so bad position that we are in pancreatic cancer. You said no one wants to have this awful disease, and we need to do everything that's possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Should stick in with a couple of questions, maybe. And this is a hard one, but we can start with you, Stefan and Camilla. Now we are talking about using this technique to monitor existing cancer. Do you see any kind of future where you can use it as a screening tool to detect cancer in the first place? Or is that very, very far away?
So that's similar to what Natera said. I mean, we are also thinking about or developing concepts around cancer screening, but it's a very, very hard problem. And there are a lot of companies, a lot of big companies that have $100 billion that have been trying to do this, like Grail, and their results are pretty mixed, actually. So if they can't solve it with $100 billion, I think there is also a scientific need also to get actually the technologies developed that can do this. At the current technologies, from what I've seen, it's not good enough to justify using it on a large scale. I think on an individual basis, I think as a patient, you would probably see it differently if it works because it will work for people. It just doesn't work good enough to justify the expense on a sort of national level. And that's quite far away still.
And your point, Klaus?
Well, I feel that early detection should be probably in the beginning restricted to patients at risk. So, for example, in pancreatic disease, you have many patients that have these cysts detected, many of them incidentally detected, not even with any symptoms. But this scares also patients because now you have these cysts, and of course they will be monitored with the imaging, and they will look whether it will increase or not, whether it's a main branch or side branch and things like that. But these are not very, very accurate measurements. So let's say if we would have an accurate measurement, a blood test to say, okay, this patient with the cyst has a risk to develop, has already a pre-neoplastic disease, and the other patients has just, benign disease. If we could say that with higher accuracy, then we could use these tests really for higher risk patients. I don't think we need to start with the general population screening. I mean, we have now so many risk determinants for individuals that we could probably use these tests really and restrict them at least first to the high-risk populations. Because these individuals are already concerned, right? They know that they have some risks. They know that there's no good test to tell whether they really develop cancer or not, but it's in their mind all the time. And I think these individuals, these humans, would be very helpful and grateful if there would be a test that could relieve them from this fear or would lead to some action.
Yeah, exactly. We do have tests today to show if you have a higher risk to have cancer, of course. And those people that do that could, of course, be helped by having some kind of follow-up then.
Exactly.
Instead of just waiting for the tumor to be seen.
Exactly. Especially if you have a tumor that is so aggressive, you don't want to wait, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Klaus, sorry if I'm jumping in there, Anders. You are also in those big programs looking at different techniques for doing this. So can you say something on the different techniques and what you think is working well today, or where you are positioned on the different methods? We have heard.
We have started 1.5 years ago, And now I will say something that makes you even more sad or angry. It took us more than 12 months to get all the paperwork ready to exchange samples between Sweden, Germany, Spain, and so on, because of this data protection law. And really, I mean, it is unbelievable, you know, that with this bureaucracy, we waste our time, and we waste really the time to develop something new. And we call it protection, but I have my doubts that it's really protecting because it's actually slowing down. So in all the European projects, I overlook all European projects on early detection. It's a big cluster. We are all in a network, right? We at least lose 12 months, usually more, before the paperwork is ready to exchange a blood sample between 2 European countries, which, I mean, to me is insane, to be honest. You know, it makes me very sad. It was not like that 30 years ago or even 20 years ago when I started my career. It has become worse and worse. And again, this is something where patient organizations should jump in and say, come on, you know, I mean, the data are always protected already for decades. There had been very few incidents. And if there are really very bad guys somewhere in the world that want to hack into your computer, they will do it anyway.
Exactly.
All right. Right. So what we do here is, to me, really an enormous bureaucracy for a very, very small benefit.
Yeah, that's so silly. I heard exactly the same thing from Matthias Löhr when I talked to him the other day at the big Karolinska Institute's PanCan congress that was held. He said the same thing, and that we don't want to hear that as patients. But if we forget about that for a moment, where are we on evaluating these methods? And it seems on the diagnostic part of that. I'm a little bit curious about that too.
No, I think there are promising results, but it's for the early detection, I would say for us, we are just in the middle of it. It's too early to say, really. We know, I mean, that the tests that are available now for, let's say, multi-cancer screening, there are, I would say, not sensitive enough to detect early pancreatic cancer at stage 1 or even at the pre-neoplastic stage. So we work on the sensitivity. There are tests based on protein and RNA in the blood that have promising results. We are also using those. So I must really say, if you ask me 1 or 2 years from now, I probably have a better answer. We are now combining these different approaches, and then we have to see what is really the best. So today, if you ask me what is the best test for early detection of pancreatic cancer from the blood, I can only say I don't know yet. But I think we are working on it, and worldwide, I mean, not only we in Europe, also in the US and in other areas in Asia, people are working, I would say, very, very intensively on early detection of pancreatic cancer now, on blood tests. So I'm actually a bit optimistic that in the next years there will be something that is suitable for this, you know.
But in the meantime, there are some tests and mechanisms out there that are actually also supported by studies and data that can be used. So is there anything in the, like say, the European regulation that is talking about doing ctDNA tests for monitoring pancreatic cancer?
I think for monitoring, it's probably easier because you know that you have a cancer, you know which type of cancer, you know which kind of molecular composition the cancer had or which kind of protein composition. So monitoring is, from a research perspective, a bit easier than to say, okay, you want to detect a tumor, but you don't know exactly the molecular composition. For example, let me make one example to make that clearer. In pancreatic cancer, you have many patients have mutations in the KRAS gene, 90% or so. So you would think, okay,
I'm one of them.
right? Yeah. Simple. You just detect the KRAS in the blood, which is also easy to do, okay? And you have a pancreatic cancer detection test. It sounds so simple, okay? Now comes the reality. In reality, many of us who are over 50, okay, also have mutations in KRAS, which are not associated so far with any disease. So you have a specificity problem, right? How did people find out? But they did actually studies between pancreatic cancer patients and their relatives, and they used the relatives as controls, as healthy controls, okay? And then they found out the relatives also have frequently these mutations, and then they extended it to a large population. So it was not specific enough, okay? So you see, sometimes you have to look at the data and see, is it really a molecular alteration that is not occurring, for example, in your normal blood cells or in some other cells, okay? So early detection is really a bit more, as I said, more challenging than the monitoring of a known disease, yeah.
Okay, but the monitoring of a known disease, you would then say that that could actually be done today and helpful?
I think that could be done today. The key question is really what kind of, let's say, therapy or increased, let's say, imaging density or whatever. I mean, what is the consequence? That need to be discussed on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. So that we can then do today, and we don't have the full answer. We don't know exactly how to handle it. We don't have exactly all the answer, but here it seems that we have enough to actually help and support today's patients. It sounds like from this discussion.
Yeah.
That's very good to have. In the discussions going forward with our wonderful healthcare providers.
Yeah, maybe I can say something also at the end, that there in Sweden there are a lot of national efforts to for precision medicine. I mean, every country in Europe does these things, but there are these efforts, and if there is more pressure to also through these efforts have studies be funded to include patients for monitoring, for instance, then that's an easier way for us as these providers to get in, because then it's sort of a research study, even though it maybe is a very large study that includes a lot of patients. But as Klaus said, it takes a lot of time to get this started, and there needs to be a lot of pressure on the system to get this funded and going, and to include as many patients as possible. That's not a trivial thing to do. But I think, I think it's definitely something that would benefit everyone, actually, because then that also gives us the data to get the approval, to then get it reimbursed and get it out into the real world.
And this is very well said, because if we can have, for example, Cancerfonden to help out here, to start a trial to see how this works in reality for monitoring now, then we can help patients, and we can do something to get some learning going and evaluate it. That can be done now without waiting for all the paperwork.
Yep. I have one final question, I think, that is quite interesting. What would you say about using artificial intelligence as a tool to help detect, or are you already in some way doing that in different tests and different tools?
No, I think this is very important. Absolutely, we are doing that also in our pancreatic early detection cancer, study. because we want to maybe include all the information from the blood, different blood markers, but also the imaging information and other information, known from the patient, like diabetes development or whatever. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, these systems will be useful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what will be interesting is now that all the patient information gets more digitized, you can actually use AI to look at hundreds of thousands of patient records instead of having one clinic with one doctor who has access to a few hundred. So that might be able to find patterns that you wouldn't normally see, especially in more rare diseases, because every center only sees a few of those patients, but in all of Europe or all the world, there's many patients.
Exactly.
But then it goes back to sort of these data regulations and whether it's allowed to be used.
Yeah. I mean, for example, our healthcare providers, in Germany, and I'm sure in Sweden and other countries too, the healthcare providers have an enormous, treasure of epidemiologic data. They know exactly what happens to the patients because they have to pay the bills, right? And but in Germany, they have to delete their data after 5 years for so-called data protection. So, I mean, this is incredible, right? We have a treasure for epidemiologic studies, right? And we throw them away because some people who are 20 years old feel that there need to be a strong data protection law. And nobody who has cancer can understand that, right?
No.
So, no, I think there's a lot of work to do with these regulations, because I think also when we do a stepwise learning, it would be good to then store the data in a register to really see at the end, do we see a common picture of what's going on, right? So we want to do research, really, and there are very nice instruments to do research, but with this kind of protection, we really lose all these possibilities. Yeah.
Let us know if we can help. Klaus and Camilla and Stefan. Palema is there to help us patients.
Yeah, we are.
Great.
Yes. So then actually we have run out of time. So thank you very much for attending today. It was an interesting discussion. I actually posted a couple of links now in the chat. Sorry for those of you who don't speak Swedish, about those articles that we have out today. And we will also publish the sending from the television where Eva and Ralph was attending earlier. So yes, what more to say? Of course.
A big thank you to our speakers. It's very, very nice to have you here. And
yeah. And also thank you, of course, to our sponsors, as I mentioned in the beginning, making this webinar possible. And maybe we'll see you in the afternoon session, some of you attending here today. And yeah, and also I actually do this in Swedish now because I think most visitors are Swedish. Så stanna gärna kvar några sekunder efter vi stänger mötet här, så kommer ni komma till en sida där ni kan lämna lite betyg på vad ni tyckte om det här. Som vanligt så tar vi tacksamt emot all kritik, bra som dålig. Så ja, har du något att tillägga, Christina?
Nej, just att jag tycker det här var en jätteintressant förmiddag och väldigt intressant diskussion här.
Precis. Okej, så tack. Thank you.
Tack.
Have a good day.